I'm Brad Kramer from Provenio Consulting, and in the wake of the Beirut explosion, in the port that where ammonium nitrate exploded, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about that incident and what kind of takeaways we can learn from that in our own communities. With my company, part of what I do is hazmat training, so training companies that have materials like ammonium nitrate, how to handle it, how to respond to emergencies and stuff like that, as well as environmental reporting. Um, we have what's called a Tier 2 report. I'll talk about that in a few more minutes here, and how that corresponds to this type of incident. Just a real brief background on the explosion. I don't have a lot of details. I mean, obviously the investigation's ongoing, and I've never been to Beirut. I don't have any inside knowledge. All right. So basically, so far, they know about 150 people have been killed. Still a very large number. I'm assuming that number is going to keep growing as they investigate and find more. What it was 2,750 roughly tons of ammonium nitrate, and that was seized off a Russian ship in that port in 2013. So it had been taken from the ship, which the ship had been having technical problems, and basically just had to make emergency port there. So, and the ship had been abandoned. So they emptied the ship, put it in a warehouse, and it's been sitting there ever since. Ammonium nitrate is used as a fertilizer. Here in the Midwest, if you live in a Midwestern community, especially a rural community, you're probably very close to a large supply of it. Not 3,000 tons, but you probably have an agronomy facility within a few miles of you with 1, 2, 300 tons of the stuff. All right. It gets unstable when it sits. So the 7 years or so it's been sitting since 2013. It started to decay, and that makes it even more unstable. The blast itself left a crater of about 140 meters. I mean, that's bigger than a football field, substantially. And it actually blew a ship right out of the water onto the shore. So just a massive blast, almost as big as the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. If you've seen the video, which is all over Facebook and stuff, I mean, just unbelievable what that did. And the blast was felt for miles away, hundreds of miles actually. All right, so back to how that affects us. What kind of takeaway can we learn? We've had very similar explosions in the United States, and presumably we're probably going to have more. In 1947, there was a ship in the bay in Texas City, Texas, had just about as much ammonium nitrate on it, roughly 2,000 tons, and that one killed 581 people. And that, it was a massive explosion, almost as big as the one that we saw in Beirut. Obviously, in 1947, they didn't have cell phones everywhere, so unfortunately, we don't have footage of it, but we can imagine that's about what it looked like. West Texas, the city of West in Texas, in 2013, it had an agronomy, a grain elevator or agronomy center with fertilizer, and it exploded. And in that one, 15 people were killed. That had only 240 tons, and that basically leveled the city block. And there's some other issues with that one as well. So you have stuff like this in your community, nearby you. All right. So it's always good to know what's in my community. How could this impact me? What kind of incidents do I need to be prepared for? Can't necessarily prepare for something like this, but having an idea of what's in your community. And that's why we have what's called community right to know laws. That's different than employee right to know laws. An employee right to know law means I, as an employee, I'm working for a company. I have a right to know what I'm working with for chemicals, what PPE I need, and stuff like that, right? Community right to know act. That basically means that I have a right to know what's down the street from my house. What is potentially leaking into my groundwater? What kind of emergency incidents, such as an explosion like this, could happen nearby, stuff like that. All right. And it is online. All right. So if you Google Minnesota Community Right to Know Act, or whatever state you live in Minnesota, we have the MPCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and you go to their website and you look it up. And it's under an act known as EPCRA, EPCRA. All right. Anyway, so you can look at your neighborhood and it'll have little dots on everything, and you can pull it up. So if there's, let's say there's a anhydrous ammonia facility, there's ammonium nitrate, whatever different chemicals or processes that meet certain thresholds are going to be on that map. So you can pull it up and see what's in your neighborhood. You have an absolute right to know what's there. So I recommend knowing what's in your neighborhood, what could possibly happen, so that your family can have emergency response plans to coordinate with that. I mean, if there's an explosion like this, what's your family going to do? Where are you going to take cover? Stuff like that. If your windows are, blown out, something like that. Not unrealistic. Just having that plan in place. Know what's in your neighborhood. All right. Second thing is, if you have a facility, any type of manufacturing plant or agronomy or agricultural business, you're required to report to your state government the what's called a Tier 2 report. And that Tier 2 report, the whole reason for that report is so that then the government has knowledge of what's on your facility, and then that information goes to the community first responders. So a fire department's not rolling up on a fertilizer warehouse having no idea what's in there. They know approximately how much ammonium nitrate's there, as well as other harmful or toxic or explosive flammable chemicals and stuff like that. So they're not going in blind. They have an idea. They know how far back to stage fire trucks. They know how far back they have to evacuate in the community, all that kind of stuff. If there's, let's say there's a gas station nearby, they know that they need to put some focus on ensuring that gas station is protected from any type of blast. All that kind of stuff that goes into it. All right, so if you have a facility that has these type of chemicals, extremely important that you do your Tier 2 report every year, and it's done accurately. All right. The next one is, what's the cause of this blast? That one I don't know. It's still under investigation. One report I've seen was something was being cut with a torch. They were torching a hole to actually secure a door. But just today I've seen a report that the president or whatever of the country is looking into possible terrorist or military strikes. I'm not going to go into that here, but just let's assume that it was hot work, right? Somebody is using a torch. They didn't have the safety protocols in place. A spark hit something. Possibly that was fireworks being stored, and that is actually what ignited the ammonium nitrate. I don't know. I'm not getting that far into it. But anyway, my point and how this affects us in the United States and everybody else. If you're going to be working in a facility, make sure you have a hot work program. All right. So if you're going to be welding, using a torch to cut, basically anything where you're using open flame, make sure you have that program in place, because that could have saved, if that was the cause of this explosion, that could have saved many lives. All right, so that involves making sure you have a program in place that says, okay, before I do hot work, before I break out that torch and light that baby up, I'm looking around me. I'm looking for possible things that could be ignited from that torch. I'm making sure that if there's things that can't be moved, I cover them with a blanket that's going to protect them from sparks. And I'm going to have somebody that's going to be what's called a fire watch. They're going to stay behind, depending on what the area is, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever. And they're going to watch that area, just make sure no fire breaks out, having a fire extinguisher handy. So if a fire or an ember does start to smolder, they can hit that thing quick and put it out safely before we end up with a kaboom, right? So some very important takeaways from this. Make sure that if you have hazardous materials in your facility that meet required thresholds, you're reporting them, and make sure that Tier 2 report gets to your local fire department. Know what's in your community. Understand your community right to know laws so that you can know what's nearby. Make sure you have hot work programs in your facility, and basically just be aware of what's going on around you. My thoughts go out to the people in Beirut. I mean, this was a horrible tragedy. Looks like about 300,000 people are homeless because of it. So some really bad stuff coming out of it. So let's make sure we don't have something like this happen in your own neighborhood, and learn from this like we should learn from everything like this that happens in the safety field, right? So if you need help with Tier 2 reporting, hot work programs, anything like that, feel free to reach out to me, ask questions. I'm happy to help you. But Brad Kramer with Provenio Consulting, stay safe and let's not have a big explosion like this anywhere else in the U.S. Bye.